Alrighty, let's get started. Welcome to week 5. We're going to talk about the spooky, scary animator today. In Halloween, in the spirit of Halloween, figured we might as well go into this topic. I was going to originally cover avatar optimization, but I think I'm going to save that for next week. Although we can brush on it a little bit today if we run out of time, or if we have too much time. Rather, if I get it through all my material too quickly. But I think it'll probably be fine. As usual, I'm going to have a workshop for an hour after class. Feel free to discuss whatever you'd like. Work on your stuff, talk about whatever you want to see next week, et cetera, et cetera. And always feel free to interrupt with questions. I have the voice chat text channel up on my other monitor. Always feel free to ask whatever you want to there, or just raise your hand or whatever. I don't know. So, the animator. What is it? Why do we use it? How does it work? Whenever we go to add toggles onto an avatar, really whenever we want to make any change live to our avatars using parameters, we have to make a animator layer for it. A lot of times when we're doing this in VR, you can, like for simple stuff, you can choose VRC Fury. VRC Fury can handle, as we've discussed in previous classes, just adding toggles to Avies and has a pretty powerful system for it. We talked about this a little bit before, and I'm going to go ahead and add a VRC Fury toggle component here onto this sweatshirt object, just to kind of give an idea of what it looks like here in just a minute, just to add on to additional material. And then we're going to show how to do it manually as well. So what is the animator? On every avatar, when we go to our avatar here, we can see in the inspector, not in that inspector apparently, we have our VRC avatar descriptor. And inside the VRC avatar descriptor, we have our playable layers. This is where all of the animators live. There are a whole bunch of different kinds of animators. They all do slightly different things. We are mostly going to only be concerned with the FX layer. If you want to know more information about what all of them do, you can go to VRC School. It's a really nice website. There's a whole bunch of information. I will put a link to it in our Unity Blender discussion chat that I should have already had pulled up. Gosh, there are so many channels. There we are. This website's pretty dang nice. Has a whole bunch of different, whole bunch of information specifically on the animator, right? Pretty much everything I'm going to cover today is included in this in some way, shape, or form. But specifically, you'll be looking at animators, which I believe goes into detail about the different layers somewhere in here. Somewhere. I'm not really too worried about sharing it because we can just stick in the FX layer and that's going to be good enough. And we can come back to it later. Playable layers? Yeah, that's the one. Cool. So, you can see this locomotion layer, which is used to animate the skeleton. Apparently, except for the hands, which is probably the gesture layer down here. Yep. Whole bunch of other information here to read at your own leisure. But focusing on the animation layer, or the FX layer in particular, we can click on the FX layer right here to go find the FX layer for our avatar inside of the project hierarchy. Clicking on it originally doesn't do anything. It just shows you an empty object here, but you can go over to this animator tab to go see the contents of the animator. The animator tab itself is made up of our viewport here, which is showing our state machine, the list of layers over here, and then the list of parameters right here. I'm going to go over each of these individually. Starting off with parameters, going to layers, then going to the actual state machine itself. These parameters are the same parameters that are used on the avatar's naming itself. We've gone over previously the parameters list on an avatar, which is all this stuff over here. All of these map one-to-one with those. There's another tool we're going to discuss today that's a paid tool that actually can link the two of them together pretty nicely and show you the details of the parameters list inside of your animator parameters. I'll put a link to that in chat here soon, but that is a paid tool, so I'm avoiding discussing it directly today. So these parameters are what drive the actual states of the animator. If you have anything coming externally from the animator, like of course a toggle on your avatar, or a slider on your avatar, we're going to be discussing hue sliders today as well. You put it here. 4 different types, floats and spools and triggers, which I actually am unfamiliar with, so won't be discussing today. Layers. Each one of these state machines that come up in an animator needs a layer to control it. So if we wanted to make a new layer, we can just click new layer, type in whatever we want here to preferably describe what we're doing, like say sweatshirt. And we're good to go. There's this little config option here, which will have a bunch of masking and a bunch of other options in here that we mostly don't have to worry about, except for the weight. For some reason, by default, the weight on these is a 0 by default in Unity. We need to make sure that is set to 1. There's a tool called Rats that we can download that I have installed here, and I will put a link to in chat that automates that bit for you and adds a couple of other small niceties to the animator. Highly recommend it, and it's free, so no reason not to use it. That is also in the Unity Blender discussion chat. And that can be added to VRC Creator Companion, and then you can just add it like normal, like we've discussed in previous classes. Give me just 1 second. There we go. It's pulling up the GitHub page. Not a whole lot to actually show here. It's just a bunch of text. I'm not going to bother reading off all of the text. It has a whole bunch of different options, including being able to customize your animator. You can customize the colors and stuff if that's something that you want to do, as well as setting a bunch of the animator graph defaults like I just talked about with your right defaults and your layer weight. Right defaults is a topic we're going to be discussing very briefly today. VRC School has an excellent page on it discussing all of what right defaults actually does. We can gloss over all of that and go to one simple rule, which is that it basically, with very few exceptions, your entire avatar has to either have right defaults on or off, and not a mix of the two. Rats actually has a really nice tool built into it. AV3 Manager has a tool built into it that allows you to go see at a glance all of the different right default states of your animator. I think AV3 Manager comes with VRC Creator Companion as a curated mod. Yes. So is it AV3 Emulator? I forget which one it is. We're going to add both of these. They're both curated. It's probably the Avatars 3.0 Manager, now that I think about it. But these come just built into VRC Creator Companion. If you don't see it in the list, make sure that you, up at the top right here, under Selected Repositories, click on this Curated checkbox if it's not already clicked. Going back to Unity, now that I've added those packages, it'll automatically import them, run all of their import scripts. But I am getting ahead of myself just a little bit here, as we have not yet discussed the actual Animator state machine, which is the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to work on here. So the Animator at its core is just a state machine that goes from one state to another. And those states are drawn basically with arrows between them. So we can have one state here and another state here and draw an arrow between them to say that we can go from one state to another state. And then same if you wanted to make an arrow back. These states are going to contain an animation eventually. So we're basically going to have an animation that describes some state, of your avatar, and then transition between them. So, for example, for our sweatshirt, we might have a sweatshirt off state and a sweatshirt on state. And we want to go back and forth between sweatshirt off and sweatshirt on. So I'm going to draw an arrow up from sweatshirt off to sweatshirt on, and an arrow down from sweatshirt on to sweatshirt off. We also have our entry here, which is just telling us where do we start our state machine at. Oftentimes for clothing, you're going to want to default it to on because you want your clothes to be on by default, lest they load with a transition time as you swap into your avatar. Ask me how I know. And then lastly, there is this any state here. Any state is essentially just a shortcut that allows you to, if you have many states here, let's say we have, state 3, whatever state 3 is, and we want to be able to transition from sweatshirt on to either sweatshirt off or state 3. We can just go from sweatshirt on, I guess it's the other way around. If we want to be able to go from any state to sweatshirt on, you make a transition from any state to sweatshirt on. Just a shortcut. It's effectively identical to drawing a line to sweatshirt on from every other state that you have. One other note on that is you have this exit over here as well. The main reason you're ever going to want to exit an animation is to go back to your entry. So sometimes you'll see toggles set up in a weird way where you can go, say, from sweatshirt on to off, and then off to exit. But exit just takes you back to entry, which puts it back on. That's pretty much it. If in more classic animation stuff, when you're actually dealing with animation when it comes to games in Unity, this would often be like, go do your Fortnite default dance and then exit out of the animation layer entirely. And you can have transitions as well. So each one of these arrows is customizable. Where you can specify the duration of the transition between them. So I can say that, it takes 2 seconds for the sweatshirt to go from its on state to its off state, as well as exit time, which I believe requires the previous state to be on for a certain amount of time before the transition occurs. VRC School has a lot more information about this. But it will also show you a preview, basically, of all of the different states. And the most important part is the condition. So we've talked about going from one state to another, but we haven't discussed how you go between those states. And that is a condition being met. Similar to finite state machines, if you've ever done that in like a combinatorics class or computing theory classes. To go from one state to another, you have to specify under what condition that can occur. This will be populated with all of the parameters that we have specified over in this tab as we discussed before. We have a hat toggle here on this avatar, the Clara avatar that we have been using for all of our classes that I could use. But for our sweatshirt, we're going to go ahead and create a new parameter, a Boolean called sweatshirt. We're going to make that Boolean on by default. And then we can say for our condition to go from sweatshirt on to sweatshirt off, that we would have to have sweatshirt equal to false, which means that now if our sweatshirt, if we're in the sweatshirt on state and the sweatshirt parameter becomes false, we then transition to sweatshirt off state. And we can perform the inverse, going back from sweatshirt off to sweatshirt on, where we can add a condition when sweatshirt is true to go to this state. And that's it. That's a toggle. That's all you have to do. Obviously, we can get more complicated from there, but any questions from anything we've discussed so far, which is just me rambling for 15 minutes? I have not been keeping up with chat. I should be. My apologies. Okay, nothing there. Perfect. The Animator obviously is not very useful if you're just using it for toggles because VRC Fury exists. Some people are VRC Fury purists in either direction. Some people will never use it, and some people will only use it either out of laziness or just because it's convenient, and who can blame them? It's super convenient. To do all of the same stuff I just did here, and I haven't even set up the actual animators yet, or the animations yet. I've just set up the state machine. You can go over to sweatshirt, and in our inspector, we can add a VRC Fury toggle component, and we can give it a menu path called sweatshirt. Add a when toggle is enabled, do an object toggle of the sweatshirt object, and we've just accomplished the same thing. It doesn't take much. I think this should actually be one level up, but whatever, doesn't really matter. Oh, these aren't actually on the avatar yet. That's funny. Moving on to the actual animations themselves and recording them. So we've set up our finite state machine here, but we don't actually have any content. Inside of each of these states is a motion that occurs. These are the actual animations you want to be performed. We need to set up an animation for our avatar. So first off, I need to go pull up, I think Clara Halloween 2 is empty, completely empty. We're just going to delete it. I'm sure that won't have any repercussions whatsoever. That's interesting. Don't mind me figuring out what the heck happened to my Abby. Very interesting. Oh, well, we can move forward for this right now. So, there's two different ways we can effectively go about adding our animations. Oftentimes when you're creating a object for sale, for example, or for an asset that you want to give to other people, people will make their own animator layer that eventually gets merged with the original FX layer. Or we can go ahead and set up our own FX layer using the existing animator. So for right now, we've already been working with inside of this CH22 FX layer. We're just going to keep working within this. To create a new animation, there's a couple of different ways we can handle it. One of the ways we can handle it is by using this animation recorder down here and recording a new one. And another way we can do it is just by going over to create. Right-click, create animation, right there. If you want to create an animator controller, that's right up here as well. So I could create a new animation down here and call it sweatshirt on. And this is going to be the animation that gets ran whenever we get to this state in our state machine. To easily record animations, because effectively you can technically go add properties manually, but it's much easier to just, you can hit this record button here and effectively go perform whatever action you want that animation to do, and it will just put it down here as an action. So firstly, we have to do a bit of a hack. I'm actually not sure if there's a better way of handling this, but this is how I do it. The easiest way to access all of the properties of an object to start recording is to take your animator controller and to manually go pop it onto your base avatar object. That's going to add an animator object to your avatar. This is not going to be permanent. However, it is a really easy way to start recording things onto that avatar. Because now, as soon as we click on the object up here, we get access to all of these drop downs here, which is going to contain every animation already on the avatar. And we get access to this create new clip, which was the other way I was talking about creating an animation. We can create a new clip here and call it sweatshirt off. That creates a new .anim file right here as well and brings us to it automatically in the animation window. Now, whenever you add clips via the create new clip action, it automatically puts it into the animator because this dropdown will only show things that are already in the animator, but it just tosses it into the very first layer, which you don't want it here. Obviously, this is like our base layer for the animator. Good to know if you ever see a whole bunch of extra things that have been added to the first layer. That's because create new clip automatically puts them there. We're actually just going to straight up delete it out of this layer. Where we really want it is in our sweatshirt off over here. So we can take our sweatshirt off object in the project hierarchy and drag it up to motion up here, and that applies the animation. Now we're going to see a couple of different things here. Part of this is, I think, rats being helpful. Another part of this is just built into Unity. I'm not actually sure which is which. All of these write defaults, motion time, blend time are all rats concepts, which is that plugin that we had everybody install earlier. So one thing this is telling us is that the animation clip is looping. This doesn't really matter because we're only going to have a single frame to our animation. It's not like an emote, like a Fortnite default dance or whatever, where you actually want it to have a length of time where different things are occurring, like we're not animating bones. We're just kind of setting a state. So we don't really care that it's looping, but we want that to be off. The way to do that is to click on the animation in your project hierarchy and uncheck that loop time. And now we can see the loop indicator has gone away. It also says that the animation clip has no keyframes. That is because when we go look at the sweatshirt off state, there's nothing in here. We haven't set up anything in the animation yet. So clicking back on our avatar to get back to the animation view that can be recorded, we can now go select the sweatshirt off state, and now this record button will be available for pressing. You can press on this, and now we're in a record state for our avatar. Oh, that's something. I ignore that. That's probably fine. It'll probably buff out. One thing I didn't do is move the sweatshirt into our avatar hierarchy. Kind of important. So let's try that again. Hit the record button. Now that we're recording, we can go change things in our inspector, and it will add it to our animation. So I can go basically say, I want the sweatshirt here. I want it to turn off. And bam, we have the game object for the sweatshirt unchecked as a single keyframe of our animation. You can also check it again, and you see now it's checked. It doesn't record things over time. It just records individual states. If you want to create another keyframe, you can. I think just by going down a little bit, basically go wherever you want in the animation. This is a time graph, right? So basically you're saying over time, I want this thing to happen, then this other thing going down the list. And then add another action, and it automatically adds a new keyframe for you. So now this is saying that at frame 0, it will turn the sweatshirt off, and then at frame 52, it'll turn the sweatshirt back on. We obviously don't want that. We don't need that second keyframe. It's just good to know that it exists. So we have now, I turned off the recording, so we have our toggle recorded. Sweatshirt game object gets turned off at the 0th frame or immediately. Now we need to go do the same thing for sweatshirt on, but we can take a bit of a shortcut. Since we've already recorded sweatshirt off, we can just copy and paste individual actions out of these animations. So I can just copy this, go over here, paste it, and then set this to be a 1 instead of a 0. And boom, our sweatshirt on animation is created. Also, if you're curious about this list here where you see sweatshirt off exists in it and sweatshirt on does not, that's just because we haven't added it as a motion yet. The motion for our sweatshirt on state is still none. Since I created this sweatshirt on state manually by right-clicking create animation, it's not actually part of this animator yet at all. But we're going to go at it. So we can go ahead and say sweatshirt on is the motion for the sweatshirt on state. We can go double check that a sweatshirt on has loop time off, and we no longer see that warning about missing keyframes because we have added actions for both the off and the on in the animation. And that's pretty much it. That should just work on its own. Right now, the sweatshirt and sweatpants aren't actually going to track the avatar because this doesn't have a armature built into it. It's another thing we discussed last class. I'm just being lazy and using whatever was already in the project. But this is a toggle. We have pretty much made it. And now you can also see why people use VRC Fury for toggles, because that's a pain. If I weren't discussing it, I could probably, complete it in a couple of minutes. But if you're making 100 different toggles for your avatar, that's going to take a bit of time. Any question on the basics of recording animations? Cool. So what's next? Let's see here. Let's do blend trees next. I think that I should actually just look at my syllabus for deciding what I talk about next, shouldn't I? That would be the smart thing to do. We discussed layers, recording animations, blend shapes. Hey, that was next. Cool. All right. So a lot of times you don't want a Boolean, but you want to be able to use a radial toggle. You've all seen radial toggles on your avatars oftentimes for things like hue shifting, or if you want to be able to set the color of the eyes or the clothes or whatever. You can have a radial toggle going from 0 to 1, and sliding along it changes the color gradually over that distance. I want to discuss how to create that. Looking first at the parameters that's going to use, it's going to use a float because we go from 0, which is all the way counterclockwise, to 1, which is all the way clockwise. So we can create a float here. And we're going to go ahead and change the color of the hat, for example. So we have this hat on this avatar. It's got the orange pumpkin. We're going to be able to make it so that you can change the color of that pumpkin. And I'm actually going to, for now, untoggle these sweatshirt and sweatpants because they aren't set up to move with the body correctly. I could probably go fix that, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to. So we're going to set up a hue slider for this hat color. So we've already created our parameter hat here. We can go ahead and create the parameter over in the main parameters file as well. So we can go ahead and say hat color, and that is a float. As usual, we're going to want saved on, which means that this saves across instances when you load up a new instance, load up into a new world, that it persists across it. And then synced, which means that remote clients, aka people that aren't you, can also see it. There are times to not use synced or saved, but as long as you know what they do, you can make that determination yourself. So now, since we're doing a new thing, we need a new animator layer. So we're going to create a new one, call it hat color. Now, for any time where you have some sort of radial action or some sort of continuous action, like a float changing from 0 to 1 slowly, you are going to want to use a blend tree. Blend trees are effectively ways to blend from one state to another across a spectrum of 0 to 1. So as you can obviously imagine, we're going to have our starting color, which is 0, our ending color, which is 1, and then we can blend between them. So I can quickly record those animations. Now that we've discussed that, I can just rip through it. Hat color start, go ahead, and we are going to go ahead and click on our avatar, which will have a bunch of materials. And one of these materials is the hat. So we can expand out this hat material. Right now, all of our shaders are locked. So if we go to record something, we can't move any of these sliders. Obviously, that's not going to work very well. So we're going to turn off record mode and unlock our shader. To do a hue shift, we can just do that in our color adjust, I believe. Yes, so color adjust, turn that component on. Hue shift, turn this component on. And then you can shift your hue and watch the pumpkin color change. So this is the thing we're going to want to animate. So now I can go ahead and record and move the slider just a little bit so it shows up in the recording. Move it to 0, and that's going to be our start value. Now there's a couple of other things we're going to have to do here. And actually it handled that for us, which I don't recall it ever doing in the past, which is very good, which is, we talked about this last class a little bit. Whenever you're using an animator to change a value in Poyomi materials, you have to right-click on the property you're changing and make sure animated is selected. That is very important. We're also going to be covering renamed today, but I'm going to wait until it becomes apparent why we need it before I show how to use it. So we have our hat color start. We can go make a hat color end same way. I'm going to copy and paste my file, rename it hat color end, and modify the value to be a 1 instead of a 0 here, which is to say that we've moved the hue shift slider all the way to the right on the body. It's this, which will actually be the same color, funny enough, but we now have a transition. We can go from our start color, which is 0, to our end color, which is 1 in our blend tree. So back in our animator layer for the hat color, to enter the blend tree, we can go double click, and now we can add new motions onto our blend tree. A motion is just an animation, right? So we're going to have two motions, our hat color start and our hat color end. And this graph here is basically going to show us, we should not be changing thresholds, not right now, that we are, how much of each of these animations we're applying over time. This can be obviously much more complex than just two motions with basically toggling from one thing to the next. In fact, it's a much easier way to handle this, but this is a good introduction to blend trees in the first place. This is a one-dimensional blend tree. There are other more interesting form of blend trees that we can discuss if we ever wanted to. One good example of this is if you've ever had an avatar that has controllable ears that can go like up, down, left, and right, a two-dimensional blend tree can handle something like that, where basically you have an X and a Y input, and your motion is determined based upon where your input is in a two-dimensional Cartesian coordinate system. So going back to our 1D blend tree, one thing that I always forget exists is this dropdown. This is the actual dropdown that drives the blend tree value, which value we're putting in from a 0 to a 1 here. We made this hat parameter. It's a float. I meant to call this hat color. So when you hit this dropdown, you only see float parameters because blend trees only make sense in the context of floats to begin with. So we only see one dropdown here. We can go ahead and select it. And the Unity Animator will also show us kind of a helpful shading on how much each of these is being applied at any given value of the hat color input. So we can see at 0, hat color start is applied, at 1, hat color end is applied. And you can add multiple, you can add even more. So you could add another value in between these two that triggers at like 0.5. And the graph kind of represents how this would look between each of these. And then add some additional motion in here. Sweatshirt on wouldn't make much sense, but you can see here that it kind of transitions from the first one to the second one to the third one. And you can do all sorts of stuff there. Possibilities are endless. But we're going to go ahead and delete that and focus on just our hat color change. So now that we've set up our blend tree from start to end, we can go back to our animator layer by clicking this up here. This is showing a hierarchy of the blend tree. And there are like substates that you can go into as well. Blend trees within blend trees within blend trees. We are doing that. And that's pretty much it. That will actually just work. I'm pretty sure that I could hit play right now and observe that. There's no menu. Not quite. And now I've hit play and have to wait. Luckily, that was fast. Okay. I added the parameter over here. I neglected to add a menu option to control it. So over in our CH22 menu, I can go add a new menu item, call it hat color. And this is going to be a radial puppet. Radial puppets are those sliders from 0 to 1. And then we go to this rotation and select hat color float. This parameter here, I will always accidentally select this for the parameter. Don't do that. This parameter basically just enables a parameter to go from 0 to 1 whenever you're in that radial menu, not like a permanent change. You want this rotation value down here. This is very situationally useful, but pretty rare. So we have set up our radial menu here. Now we can go ahead and start the project. Oh yeah, that'll happen. We can just ignore that. Oh, it's going to stay on the Avi. This is because we animated the sweatshirt to be on. So I disabled it in the hierarchy before I started the scene. But now that we started the scene, it ran the animation, turned the sweatshirt on. So it's just going to chill up there. We can... Did I not even have a gesture manager in this scene? Jeez. I did not have a gesture manager emulator, as we've also previously discussed in this scene. So to add that, I went to Tools, Gesture Manager Emulator. This will allow us to actually use our radial menus within the play mode of Unity, so we don't have to actually take it into game. So I can click on Gesture Manager and have other problems because I forgot I haven't copied all the components over to this guy yet. I made a copy of my avatar without all of the avatar descriptor stuff from Clara Halloween 1. Turns out that stuff's actually pretty important. That's what drives literally everything about your avatars. I'm going to be using a tool pretty quickly here called, do I even have that tool right now on this Avi? No, I do not. We're going to use Pumpkin's avatar tools to quickly transfer all that stuff over. I've discussed Pumpkins in the past, particularly when moving a new FBX in. It can be valuable to move basically every change you've made to the avatar, including all of your avatar descriptor and everything, from one root object onto another root object. And we wait. Any questions while we're waiting? I'm kind of going through all this at a breakneck pace.
Hey, Kit.
Hello, hello. Okay.
How are you?
We're doing a class right now. Feel free to chill if you'd like.
That's what I intend to do. The more
Awesome.
I learn about Unity, the better I feel.
Yes. Well, we're doing class here for another 15 minutes, and then we're doing a workshop in the Discord for like an hour. So feel free to stick around.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm a rookie avatar uploader.
Sweet. Well, happy to have you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Like your username, by the way.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Okay.
You're welcome.
Sorry, talking to folks in game. So, continuing. I lost my train of thought. Yes, we're going to use Pumpkin's avatar tools to quickly move everything over from one avatar to another. Hopefully, so I can just handle this quickly and not have to do anything special. And this should work. Oh, okay. So this is the right defaults thing we talked about earlier. And VRC Fury just kind of automatically fixes all this stuff for you, which is pretty great. We created some new animations that had a different right default state from every other animation on our avatar. And VRC Fury automatically detected that and told us you want them all to be either on or off. We're just going to hit autofix there, and it will just do the thing for us. Cool. Sweatshirt turns back on again, as we discussed. But now we can go ahead and hit Gesture Manager to load up our radial menu. I do not know why that is occurring. That is special. Wow. But we can see our radial menu as part of the gesture manager. I'm not going to try to debug that right now. And we have a hat color menu. And clicking on this hat color gives us a radial menu. And going across the radial changes the color of the hat. Whoa. We did it. And funny enough, the problem I expected to happen didn't happen, which is the rest of the avatar changing colors. Very interesting. Give me 1 second to diagnose why we didn't have that problem.
Is there a chibi slider somewhere that went to 100?
I do not know what happened there. Oh, I haven't locked. That's okay. So when we upload into game, every shader gets locked here in Poyomi. Effectively locking shaders, I discussed this very briefly in previous classes, removes unnecessary code from the shader. These shaders are huge. Poyomi's massive. It's gigantic. But we're not using most of the features. We don't have most of them checked on the shader. Locking it basically takes all of the code that would have done all of those things and strips it out, as well as setting up the animations. Some of these things can be hard-coded values. Others of them have to have inputs coming into the shader from the project, and that decreases performance ever so slightly, but it tries to hard-code those values in that it knows aren't going to be animated. So I have now locked this shader. I'm going to show off one problem we expect to occur whenever you record values on materials. I found this to be a very illuminating issue, an issue that I face all the time when I'm working on avatar optimization, which is what we're going to be covering next week. So if I go back to our gesture manager and change our hat color, it still didn't happen. No, my plan is ruined. Okay, I'm just going to describe what I expected to happen and how to fix it. So whenever you change a value on a material of a particular skinned mesh renderer, which in this case our body, which is including both the body, head, and hat, is all one skinned mesh renderer, I expect it to be changed on all of the materials. Oftentimes that's not exactly what you want, because you don't want your color to shift on the body, you want it to shift on just the hat. There's a way to get around that problem. And actually, I know why the problem didn't happen. The problem didn't happen is because we had a locked shader that didn't have the color shift animated. But if I were to add a body hue shift animation, in addition to our hat hue shift animation, it would change both of them at the same time. Even though we only recorded it on the hat, since it's a part of the same skinned mesh renderer, it changes all things, all materials on that skinned mesh renderer at the same time. That can obviously be a problem if we want to change just the hat color and the body color independently from each other. So we can go ahead and see here, expressions, hat color. Whoa, the body color changed. Oh no. And the head color didn't change because it's a locked shader, as we discussed. So if you want to be able to decouple these things, there's a couple of different ways to solve it. One of them is to just make a different skinned mesh renderer for the two different objects, but that incurs a performance detriment, both in your performance ranking in VRC and just generally slowing down people's computers for no good reason. So Poyomi has a built-in tool to handle this problem. I don't use this tool very much. I try to find other workarounds, to be honest. But it exists, and it's good to know that it exists, because I've had this problem on a ton of avies, and it's a huge pain. So if we go back to the thing we want to be animating, which is our hat hue shift, right over here. And of course I clicked off of it. I'm not very smart. We're going to lock that. There we go. We have, when we right click, more I have to unlock before I right click. We have a renamed option, renamed when locked. And it comes up with a locking explanation here, which takes you to a website, or takes you to a YouTube video, interestingly. Cool. Renamed when locked. What this effectively does is it changes the property you're animating down in your animator so that you can record an animation specifically just for this shader and not the rest of your materials. So that can be super useful if you want to be able to, as I mentioned, change the color of your body and your hat independently, even though they're on the same skinned mesh renderer using the same type of shader, which is Poyomi in this case. To do that, so we can check this renamed up here. What this will do is when we go ahead and lock our shader, it will basically generate a new name for that color adjust. It won't tell us what the name is, but if we were to go ahead and hit play right now, funny enough, we'd get the opposite thing that we wanted. The body would change colors and the hat wouldn't. And that's because we need to go basically re-record our animation. But I can just do that. Of course, we have our hat color start. I can go ahead and delete the existing animation, hit record, and change the hue shift a little bit here. And what we'll see in the animation name, if the window would get wide enough, that we have a material main hue shift _ hat. It actually renamed this property in the material on the avatar so that it would only affect this singular material and not the rest of the materials. So we can do the same thing for our ending state. All right, so we want to start at 0 and I want to copy and paste over to our end state and set it to 1. And now this will just work. We can go ahead and hit play. Notably, it doesn't apply that rename until you've locked the shader itself. And of course, this wouldn't work on a differently named material slot. This material slot is named hat, so it post-pended _ hat at the end of the animation clip. But if you were to put that on a different animation slot, it wouldn't work. So we can go over here and we can change our slider and see it only affects the hat now and not the body. This will be a very important concept when we get to next week's avatar optimization class, because one of the main things you can do to optimize your avatar is to join all of your skinned mesh renderers into just one skinned mesh renderer, and you will make heavy use of the renaming feature in Poyomi to make sure that your animations don't clash with each other. Especially on a lot of avatars for sale, you have a lot of customization options, right? You want to be able to change the color of any individual little thing. And instead of making those things all different skinned mesh renderers, which is like the noob way of handling things, we can be smarter and use the tools built into Poyomi to make our lives better and make everybody else's lives better, because our avatar is less impacting their systems less. I'm gonna have to stop playing.
Very interesting.
So you don't hear the music. Any questions on anything we've discussed so far today?
I got in on the tail end, which is my bad.
That's okay. That happens. We have, I'm recording this whole class, so it'll be up on the Temple YouTube channel here in a couple of days. I can go ahead and send you a link in Discord if you'd like.
I honestly didn't know the Temple had a YouTube channel.
Yeah,
I'm practically on YouTube every single day.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a YouTube channel for just recording various different classes we do. So a lot of the, I try to record all the yoga and stretching classes. I know that a lot of the portal posses that we do, where we bring in some of the bigger names in dance, are all recorded up there for anybody to be able to go watch.
I do have a question, though.
Yeah, go for it.
My God runners are, I'm a Godfall connoisseur, obviously, and I have the God runner, but yes, I'm in a God array right now.
Yeah.
But anyway, the God runner is, forgive my choice of wording here, so piss-ass poor that I dare not use it in worlds where there's a boatload of people. Okay. Yep. That's a common issue with some Avi creators. I mean, the God Ure that I'm currently in is optimized. This one has a good rating at least, which puts me at ease because I just bought this today. There are 2 versions that are probably poor, and then there's this one and another one which are optimized to good status at least. So that way I can be at ease knowing I'm not straining anyone's GPUs blowing the living shit out of people's headsets or computers.
Yep, that's fair. So are you asking kind of just how to optimize those other ones, the ones that don't come with a good version?
The God Runner is one of those that is not that has a very poor rating.
Yes.
And I
go ahead.
And I actually bought the God Ure earlier today.
Nice. Yes.
So I knew. So yeah. Are you going to be doing a lesson on bringing an avatar up like the God Runner from very poor to excellent or something like that?
Yes, not to excellent typically though. Oftentimes these avatars are you have to make a lot of sacrifices to get it better rating. But yes, actually I'm hoping to next week. So next Tuesday at this time to go over avatar optimization. And part of that will be taking existing avatars and making them better. You can oftentimes get to medium without much of a sweat. Like getting to good or excellent can oftentimes be very difficult, but just getting avatars to medium from very poor is usually pretty doable.
Okay. I'll definitely be here for that.
Awesome.
I might have a Google Doc open with notes.
Yes.
Taking notes. So
yes, I recommend it. Especially, I'm hoping to avatar optimization is one of the topics I actually have done. I've done a lot of work and I'm relatively competent with it. Today I'm going over the Animator, which I've used it a decent amount, but it's also not my area of expertise. But I'm really excited to go over avatar optimization, especially considering, as you mentioned, let's not fry other people's computers. Anything we can do to help avoid frying other people's computers is good in my book. Especially a lot of our events in the Faceless don't have an avatar requirement. In fact, I don't think we've ever had an avatar requirement of performance rankings.
No.
So people
you're right.
roll around with
haven't.
Exactly. People roll around with 40 or 50 very poor avies, and depending on how bad it is, especially at some of our dance events, I've seen people with 1 million polys on their avies, and it's oh.
This might sound kind of weird, but a lot of people tell me that many polys get that particular avatar into crasher status.
It can.
Okay. It was just by luck that this the God Ure folder I got from Godfall earlier today had a good rated avatar version at least.
Yes.
So I can rest easy knowing that with the God Ure at least I'm not blowing up computers or anything like that.
No, I'm trying to fry an egg on my GPU.
Basically what I say to people is, you want to be buying me a new GPU? Then switch out of that avatar then. I'm security for the Faceless, and sometimes people will try to sneak in with a high polygon GPU.
Yeah.
I tell them, hey, you want to stick around? That's fine, but you'll have to change your avatar.
Maybe swap to a more performant
we don't.
Yep.
Yeah, good or better. Good, I think. Good or better. But out of the time I've been here, in regards to your question, to your thought about having a better. Whoa.
Yeah, sorry about that. Pull up OBS on the OBS recording.
Yeah, like you were saying, yeah, we don't want to be blowing up anybody's. Now this one, according to that scale, is good. So at least I can rest easy knowing I can use this with no issues.
Yes, absolutely. But that's one of the bigger jumps between good and excellent is that poly count starts to really become a problem. 70,000 polys is already not great. When I look at my avatar in Blender, so if I pull up Blender for my Avi, I can compare the two different versions I have. So I have my, I think Crunch 24. No, that's.
I would never have the patience for Blender.
It's certainly something. Also, I'm going to have to go back a whole bunch of versions here. Bear with me. We are reaching the end of class time, but I'm going to keep talking for a few minutes here. Keep yapping. So looking at this version of my Avi, this is my poor version. I could probably get it to medium if I really tried. I just haven't really tried. I just want it to be not very poor There's a lot of places will just have a not very poor restriction. And a lot of people, like I do a lot of dancing, right? For clubs and stuff. And I want to have the highest chance that people are going to see my avatar possible. Potentially that might be egotistical, but whatever. A lot of people block very poor.
I don't want people seeing my fallback while I'm dancing.
Yeah,
exactly, right?
It even says in the SDK, people will block this avatar due to its poor rating.
Yep. So you can see my triangle count here is 69,760. Less than 250 tries away from being very poor. And that's common for a lot of these optimized avis. You work right up to the limit. One of the things I did, like I decimated my hair, for example. Decimation is oftentimes a no-no. But for sometimes you just need to do it if you really want to get everything to fit within the requirements. So I used a low poly version of my base and then also decimated my hair. We can compare that to my original version. Funny enough, too, you can also see on my hierarchy here, we're going to talk about skinned mesh renders. This is, I guess, just a preview for next week. So when we look at Blender in our object hierarchy here, each one of these objects will eventually become a skinned mesh renderer. I have just one object here that contains literally everything on the Avi. And I use UV discards to toggle on and off clothing if that's something you want to be able to do on the Avi. Even easier if you don't want to do that because you don't even have to deal with UV maps. But you can see like my UV for this Avi is fairly complicated with each one of these tiles is discardable. So basically I have you can actually kind of tell based upon the contents of the tile what's included in it. I have a tile for the shoes, a tile for the shorts, a tile for the ears, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So basically I'm not going to do it, but if I put this in Blender, it would tell me the same thing basically that's up on your screen right now.
Yeah, you'd have to go kind of manipulate around with it. We did an introduction to Blender class a couple weeks back, but I'm also happy to work with you in workshops on any of this stuff. And I'll contrast this briefly here with the original version of my Avi before I did any of this optimization. I don't even remember where this is. Maybe a little poly test. Nope, that still has way too many. It's going to be this one. So this is back before I did any optimization on the Avi whatsoever. And it's pretty dang obvious. First off, we have 265,000 tries in the scene. That's not even showing like the bed and the temple logo that I have on the Avi. So the Avi in total had 337,000 tries. Already way blowing over our maximum for poor. But also, look at the number of skinned mesh renders we have. This is before I combined them all. So every single object is its own skinned mesh renderer, which brings up to like, 15, 20, something like that. Horribly non-performant.
So basically that is the life or death for the rating of an avatar.
Yeah, well, performance is kind of split up into two parts, right? There is the make it a good rated avatar, and then there's the we know this decreases performance. There's a really great Twitter post I saw a while back. I wish I could. I tried to look for it today and couldn't find it. Of somebody who actually did a bunch of analysis in Unity, adding a bunch of they added like 10 million tries and looked at the performance difference. And they added like 10 million animator layers and checked the difference in performance, right? And kind of did that over and over again for each different statistic to try to understand what actually impacted avatars the most. And the general consensus for the most part is everything impacts it a little bit in some way, shape, or form. So like having more animator layers, having more skinned mesh renderers, having more tries, they all impact it. The question is just by how much, right? So then it becomes a cost-benefit analysis of how much time do we really want to put into this? Just joining all of these meshes together took me very little time, right? I can just kind of click all of them. If I didn't care about toggles, this would take me no time at all. I can just click on all these things, hit Control J, and bam, one skin mesh render, done. But I can't toggle any of these things now. I have to set up UV discards to properly toggle them. If you don't care about toggles, or another thing we're going to talk about for optimization is just delete things. Have one outfit that you wear on your optimized version. I have like these hoodie and leggings I never wear, much less need on my optimized version. Just delete them. Just get rid of them. Same with there's other layers of clothing underneath my main outfit that I wear. just delete them. These old ears.
Delete yourself.
But yeah, pretty much, right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, delete yourself to pure nakedness.
Well, yeah. Hopefully not pure nakedness, but whatever's your shtick. It's VR chat. I'm not going to judge you.
Yeah, well, VRC might have something to say about it.
Yeah, they might. That's its own topic.
But I can give you. Yeah, I can give you an example. A friend of mine who runs Hysteria here in the VRU, she has a good or better rate avatar requirement, which is why I hardly go to Hysteria much. But I thought, she told me the reason why we have that is because she doesn't want to have to get people to change avatars before they even walk in the door.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yep. No, we can definitely just discuss that next week. Other things we can probably discuss a little bit on that topic are how to manually reduce poly count of objects. So decimation is a thing that exists, and we're going to discuss the positives and negatives. A lot of people are purists on not using the decimate tool ever. I don't think that's necessarily appropriate either. There are definitely reasons to use it and reasons not to use it. We'll cover that. Also, oftentimes, like base meshes especially will have high poly and low poly versions. Like the base I bought, which is ZinFit here, has a high poly version that's 43,000 tries for just the body. That's over half of our limit right there. And then I think the low poly version is something like 20,000 or something like that. It's way less. This hair I decimated down from 22,000 to something much more reasonable in the low poly version. Other stuff like that. We'll talk about all that next week. I don't want to take up too much time today, especially considering we are 7 minutes over.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm sorry for yakking.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I appreciate people having questions. People getting into this is, one of the reasons why I run this class in the first place is to get people passionate about this topic, right? I'm relatively new to both Blender and Unity work, like serious work. I've only been doing this for a couple of months, but I've been diving into it pretty heavily, and it's a big passion of mine now. And I want to give that passion to other people and have other people be able to be creative, right? That's one of the things I love about Blender, especially, is you get to go make whatever you want to make, and then in VRC you get to show it off to other people. Like, it's not just making things into the void. You actually get to for example, on my avatar, I consider my avatar to be like an extension of me. So I get to like make me look the way I want to other people in VRC, and that's pretty dang cool.
I never thought of it from that. I never thought of it from that aspect.
Yes.
I always considered an avatar like how you identify yourself on here. And the God series, as I call it, is kind of my identity.
Yes.
On here, you'll either see me in a God Ure or a God Runner or a God Magician.
Yep.
And I think, yeah, that's how I identify myself as.
Yeah, I think this is just an extension of that same principle, right? Instead of it being like what you wear, it's more like how you identify, as you mentioned, right? So being able to make your own Avi, you can really dive into it and make something that feels like it's your own, which is pretty dang cool. Okay, back on topic before we wrap up class. Any questions on the Animator or anything we discussed today? Cool. I will leave you with just one more. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask. So I'm wanting to put. I've got an avatar that has black fingernails, and so I was wanting to put logos on the fingernails and be able to switch between them.
Yes.
So how would you use this for switching between materials?
Yes, totally can discuss that real quick. I have an easy way of handling that, but essentially we can record a material change. You can also use decals for this. So you actually can just make a shader difference to handle this. Either way is fine. They both work. Decals are effectively a second texture applied on top of the first texture. So, if you wanted to add on to the nails instead of completely changing them and you just want to add little logos, you can do it with decals.
I would use decals then.
You can
take the logos and make them a decal and then swap between. Okay.
Yeah. And you can record your differences in textures here. So let's go back to our hat. Let's say I made an edit to my hat texture. So I have this hat base color here. Let's say I make a hat base color 2. I'm actually not sure you can just swap between images. I have never actually tried this. I've only ever swapped between materials. Guess we're going to find out. So if I click back on my Abby, we can go back to our hat. Let's say hat color start. Sure, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to hit record and then drag my texture into this texture block right here. It looks like it did not record that, so just kidding on that. You'll instead need to use material swaps. So you can animate changes from one material to another. And I do this all the time for, like, if you've seen my shorts in game, for example, I have multiple different textures for the shorts that can all be swapped between. That's the same mesh under the hood. It's just a different set of textures on a different material. And then I swap which material is applied to that skin mesh renderer. To do that, I can go over to my materials list here, and somewhere in here we'll have a hat material right there. I can go create a new hat material, call it hat 2, and you'd make some sort of change. For right now, to make a distinction, I'm going to make it red, so the hat will appear very red. And I can go through the same process we set up over here for the animator, or I'm going to show you the VRC Fury way, because I think that's just as valuable in this context. So if I wanted to change the hat, I could go anywhere on the Abby. Actually, it doesn't really matter. Go add a VRC toggle component, like we discussed before. But you can make it, instead of an object toggle like we talked about before, you can make it a material swap. So I can just say, I want to change hat color. I'm going to change the body renderer, change the hat material slot to the hat 2 material. And that's all you have to do. That would just work. So now if I have hat 2 material is red, I can go ahead and hit play. Another thing that's worth discussing, well, here, I'll wait one thing at a time. This shouldn't take very long. ADHD moment. Okay. So we have added that toggle in. So now if I go to my expressions over here, we'll see a toggle, or we'll see I named it hat color. Silly me. But clicking on that changed the color. You can't really tell what it did, but it definitely did swap materials from one to the other. And then our hat color toggle, funny enough, it doesn't work. Interesting. Not really sure what happened there, but in theory, that thing should just work for you. We can set up an animator with the exact same thing. Shouldn't be a problem. Should be pretty easy. I'm actually curious why that didn't work the way I expected it to.
I'm going to head out.
Alrighty.
I've got other commitments I need to attend to, so...
No worries. Take care. Thanks for joining.
Yep. Have a good day. Night.
Yep, you too. Hope to see you next week.
Yep.
Cool. One more thing worth mentioning real quick is what is VRC Fury actually doing under the hood? It's doing the exact same thing we did. It's just doing it programmatically. So it creates its own animations and its own animator layer inside of the FX animator. It just does it in a way that allows us to easily modify it via components in the inspector. If you ever want to see what VRC Fury is doing, which can be very valuable for debugging if something is broken and you can't figure out why, everything seems to be working in this view, but then you upload it into VRC or you hit the play button and it doesn't work, you can manually bake your VRC Abbies. So if I select my Abby and then go over to VRC Fury, I can build an editor test copy. What this will do is it'll run all of the same stuff that VRC does when you upload or hit the play button, but make it onto a temporary version. I can go ahead and hide our previous version of the Abby. We have this VRCF test copy, which has all of the same stuff that we had on our Abby, but it's applied all of the VRC Fury stuff to the FX layer. So I can actually go click on this FX layer, click into it in the animator, and see not only the things that were on our animator layer from the get-go, but also anything that VRC Fury has added for us. In this case, we have this sweatshirt blend tree. That can be valuable for debugging, just to know what's going on. Don't upload this copy. It's not made for that. Cool. Any other questions? Sorry that we're running late. I figure more information is not a bad thing. People can drop in and drop out as they feel comfortable. And I'm going to be here for another 45 minutes or so for workshopping. Cool. Alrighty. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you. See you all next week, same time, class 6. We're going to be discussing avatar optimization, as I mentioned.